So, welcome. Thank you for making time on a beautiful Saturday afternoon between all your obligations of family and businesses, etc. As discussed, we wanted to take some time to share our individual motivations as a first step. Then, as a second step, we want to get clarity among this group about what it is that we mean by when we say the last step in the post-harvest value chain. Because I learned or have a hunch that the reason we're stuck at the moment, so if it feels a little stuck, is that we don't have clarity on this question. So we don't know who to speak to and what to ask, really exactly. Well, we have different ideas of that. And so the idea is to share and discuss that so we get a common understanding to unstuck us. And then as a last step, make a decision on what's going to happen next. Is everybody fine with that agenda?
Yeah, sounds
All
good.
right.
Yeah, sounds good.
Since Anesu and Elizabeth aren't here, there are videos of our conversations available that in which they also share their motivation. So that can be all viewed by you guys. So does someone feel the pressing need to share their motivation? Who wants to go first? Anyone? Okay, I'll go first. So I think I've said it to all of you, so I keep it short. But I believe that we're in multiple dimensions on a massive phase shift for humanity. On the one hand, we're potentially facing extinction in the next, well, basically in this century, and that's a real possibility. We might also face not extinction, but really, really disastrous situations where many people die. And this is something I don't only want to help avoid, but I want to use this also as a platform to come up with new and better ways to live and to work towards a world that allows every human on the planet without exception to thrive, to live a fulfilled life. And I am convinced that this is possible, but I'm also convinced that this is not possible in the current way of doing business, politics, and society in general. So we have to explore new ways of doing things. And so that's my ultimate motivation. And why? How does that tie into Motherland? I think it ties into Motherland in the way that we are trying to explore this, the space of possibilities and potential in how do we do things differently and independently of the current system, and helping people to start leapfrogging into a future that is a lot better than the one we have right now. And that in very concrete ways, in the products, whatever that product might be, that we as this group find from our conversations, from our interviews. But on a more meta level, learn how to create a process and how to create the conversation like ours in a way that other people can repeat that. or that we can help other people repeat it in their continents, in their industries, in their parts of life, that they can come up with similar things in an independent way to make life good, and then share that with as many people as possible. So that is my personal motivation. You're muted.
Yeah, and I continue, and I'm making it even shorter now. So I think Thomas already said a couple of things I don't want to repeat, but I think there is one key aspect of our economy. It was extractive. It was extractive to our nature, to our land, to our soil, to the people. Yeah, and I think that was not probably bad at all, because it was a driver of development. But we came to a point that this route is not longer working. Yeah, and it will come to an end. And the question is now, are we as a species smart enough not only to discover that there is something changing that could affect our being on the planet, yeah, and it could lead to extinction, yeah, or are we really smart and not just recognizing it, but can do something against it and become a regenerative species, what would really be, from an evolutionary point of view, a huge step into the future, yeah, and give the human species a long, long time on this planet, yeah, if we do the step. So this is, so to say, my foundational layer. I'm thinking that we need to change that. Then the second piece is that I see people like us, yeah, on the whole world, sitting and working their asses off to create an impact that is reflecting what I have just said, making the planet a better place and becoming a regenerative species. So, but we are a minority right now, but we are starting founding companies, yeah, all over the planet. And if we succeed, yeah, tackling the real big challenges, then we are going to impact the people that work within our companies, but also all the people that we do business with. And if we start focusing not just on the little challenges, but on the large challenges, as we try to identify in this Motherland project, and we can really bring all the talent together with this type of process we are currently inventing, then we have something really to activate the talent, the entrepreneurial talent of the world, to create an impact and a big dent into the history of our species. And so this is my vision. And I really also like to say that agriculture, I think, is a pivotal industry, yeah, because it's nourishing us. And if we are not nourished well, we are going to suffer, yeah, and we are going to suffer in our lives, yeah, but also the land and the people and the future of the land and the people is also going to suffer. So that's why agriculture is something where it really is, yeah, it's paramount that we need to change something. And I see what's going on in Germany and all the discussions. And I really hope that Africa is not going down all the long route of extraction like we did, all the fucking failures we did as a government, yeah, and also as industries to really extract our land and make it almost dead.
But don't forget, sorry to interrupt you, but don't forget that we also extracted Africa.
Yeah. And this is also what we did. Yeah, that's absolutely true. But you have a different type of agricultural structure, and I think you have to change to the opportunity, yeah, to make it work and grow it in a regenerative way. Yeah, and I hope to yeah to to add a little bit to that development with this group. So there's a lot I can put into here, and if I can help here, and that's really something coming from my heart. Thanks.
Who's next?
All right, I'll go next. So borrowing from what Sebastian said, so my motivation basically is about where I'm from, Africa. Africa has had we've always had it rough, at least in my generation and generation before mine, or even going back, further than that. We've always had the bad end of the of the process or whatever, like from slavery to corporate companies still taking advantage and all that, poverty and all. So I owe it to myself and my community to do as much as possible to make it a better place. But more importantly, I see that agriculture is a very big it's an advantage for us because we have the land, we have the people. We really have no reason why food should be expensive. That's the first. That was what drew me to starting off Rice Valley. There's no reason why food should be expensive. There's no reason why anybody should go to bed hungry, but that's still happening. So, to the best of my ability, is to grow this company to have a capability of actually making food cheaper. So there are all sorts of problems in that system, and we can only try one at a time to help solve those problems. So for an organization like Motherland, I'm open to organizations like this, or anybody, in fact, who is ready to do something significant in Africa, especially when it comes to food, because that's like our starting point. We have to eat and be healthy before we talk about any other thing. So basically, that's what's motivating me, and I hope we make a headway. Thank you.
I guess I can go next if you can hear me. Cool. Yeah. I think what you've all said is something that all resonates with me. And like I discussed with Thomas last time, for me, I think on a very high level, it's always about the well-being of people in all the possible ways. And of course, we're talking about motherland and particularly with respect to agriculture. And that is sort of the foundation of well-being, right? If you're well-fed, you can start to think about well-being in other ways. So I feel that things I've done so far, in my career, reflect the pursuit of well-being for people in general. And I feel that if I can pursue the well-being of not just mine but also of others, while creating value, for example, while making money in a sustainable way, even better. So I tend to view solutions to problems generally from an entrepreneurial angle, and the possibilities excite me, and just knowing what is possible, or even entertaining the thought that we could do things a bit differently and actually create value. Those are the that is a situation that drives me every day. Perhaps as a related point, I see sharing, as a value that would make our world a better place. So sharing in many ways. At the moment, I'm involved in a mobility startup that promotes sharing, shared mobility. That is Twende. And, it's about why should I drive alone if, I can bring other people on board. But there are other ways of understanding that this principle. On a meta scale almost, the way we organize our cities, the way we do food production, manufacturing, the way we come up with knowledge and transmit knowledge, if we can do it generally in a way that respects this value of sharing, that it is a communal or a owned asset, I think we would have a much happier place. I really feel this, and it's something that carries me in a lot of the things that I do. So I think I really recognize all that they're saying. On the other hand, I do have worries, and I guess we can talk about it a bit later. I'm generally concerned about my ability to bring some of these ideas into action, primarily because there are practical constraints that tend to come in the way, and I hope we'll get to speak about those as well.
Thank you. Tawanda, that leaves you.
Yeah, okay. I think my key motivation has been it's primarily about the issue of agriculture, food production. I think I've shared with some of you about the situation in Zimbabwe, where pre-2000 we were, I would say, self-sufficient, and we were the breadbasket of Southern Africa. In other words, we could produce enough to feed the entire region of Southern Africa. And then post-2000, due to what was called the Fast-Track Land Reform Program, things changed. We are actually now the basket case of Southern Africa, where we are just a perennial net importer of almost anything food-related, right? And part of the issue is because I've worked with NGOs and other organizations in the food space or the agriculture space, I've come to realize that post 2000, I could say billions of dollars through NGOs, other organizations have been invested in the agriculture sector, and yet we are still a net importer of food. And the more you research about it, you look at it, and even though NGOs have, can I say, glossy impact reports, and they talk about how these farmers are doing so well and so on, this is not just a Zimbabwean problem, it's an African problem, where even at the end of the day, we are still not producing enough food to be self-sufficient for ourselves. And that forms a key motivation of why I'm excited about this initiative, in the sense that this is an opportunity to get people to start being self-sufficient in terms of food production. And also in the sense that, we need to change the image of Africa. We can't keep on having this image of being a bigger society, or bigger societies all over the place. Yet, as Luther rightly said, that we have the land, we have the people who are willing to produce, but things haven't changed. And I think this initiative is a great opportunity to actually try and correct some of the problems we're facing in agriculture. Yeah, I think, I'm finished.
Okay, thank you all. I think it's important to understand where we're all coming from, and also, like Kiptu rightly said, we're all operating under constraints. And I think if I just want to briefly share a couple of thoughts about that. I don't expect from
Sorry,
us.
I'm having trouble.
Okay. I will. Let me take 1 second and straighten my internet connection out. Don't forget, I'm in Germany. That's the internet is a bit flaky.
A bit ironic.
Yes, it's painful. But worry not. Next week I'll be in Costa Rica, and then I'm sure that the internet will be good.
You think in Costa Rica it will be better?
Yes, we just received a 10 Mbit line in Costa Rica. So, and because hardly anybody has one, probably that line will be actually pretty good. So, is this better? Is this better? Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah,
I can hear
I
you
can.
better. Yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to address Kipto's point regarding our constraints. We all have them. None of us are getting paid in any way to do this, except in what we like to call karma points, in doing something meaningful, which is good. Which is since I have the luxury of being able to having a functioning company that can pay for my expenses. I have the luxury to be able to do that. So I'm very thankful for that. I believe that there will be, or I know that there has to be, a point in which we need to implement operations into whatever we find. And at that point, we have to switch operational mode into getting resources on board that allow us to do exactly that, which includes financial remuneration for anybody who puts in time to build something. And that might be us. That might be somebody else. That is yet to see. We don't know. So we're trying to keep the bandwidth as low as possible for all of us, but as open enough to actually get to a point, because otherwise all of that time would have been wasted, and I would hate to know that this time was wasted. I mean, it wasn't wasted totally. We've met and we've gotten to know each other, but we want to actually reach a point where we can improve the lives of tens of millions or hundreds of millions of people in the next couple of years. That is what we're after here. And we know we have to get some resource, but our position for getting resources in the way we want them, which means that we can stay independent with whatever solution we come up with, and don't have to sell out to the forces that be, that will push us into a profit maximizing paradigm, which is not what we're looking for. To have a better position for that discussion, we have to get as far as possible. And what I envision, what I see is that in 2 or 3 steps from now, I am convinced we know what it is that we have to do. And then we can or prototype this with the least possible amount of effort that is required. And I'm convinced we have all of the resources we need to do that. And then we have concrete numbers along with the solution. And with that, we can then fill with partnerships that give us the resources that we need. This is the plan, right? And I think from what I heard from us now and from Elizabeth and Anesu, what I also know from Herman, is I think we're very aligned with our motivations. And so I don't have any doubt that we can actually achieve this.
So one thing I'd like to add, and I'm fully with Thomas what we need to achieve, but just to give you a quick sentiment of the people we are talking to. And we are describing the process, and then we have a core group of you that is involved in all of this since the beginning. Yeah, and people are really stunned by this fact, because normally this type of projects, as you know from development work, works differently. And this intrinsic motivation and everything what we have already come up with is kind of an achievement. But we are all also entrepreneurs, and we all know this is not good enough. Yeah, and we need to go a couple of steps further, that we then are independent from people that might have an opinion of how things might look like or should be done. When we have validated our ideas to a certain point, that we can really convince the right people, yeah, to cash in the money to do whatever it takes and what we need to make it a success. And it might be someone of us continue driving this forward. It might be someone who's joining. It might be a startup that is already around. We wish to support, I don't know yet. That's why we need to do more of validation. Yeah, I think we have to focus on what we really and agree on what we are looking for towards what point in the post-harvest supply chain or whatever. And then we need to validate further and come up with kind of hypotheses we maybe or probably should validate with a prototype, as entrepreneurs tend to do. And if you have done that, we are in a very, very good position to go to the people and then pitch it. And then the probability is quite high that we can really accumulate the required funds to go a big step further. But there's still some work needs to be done. And this is, I think, the question, how we are managing to do that as a group and as a side project of ours.
Yeah. I have a proposal for the path. And step number one is something we could solve today, which is what to be aligned on what we say when we say last step in the post-harvest value chain. Okay, so once we've done that, we need to engage with the actors in that field, whatever we define, and find out what it is that they're missing to be stronger in what they do. Right? So find out what they're missing. That's the next step. And then as a final step, ideate, come up with hypotheses of how we can solve that, and quickly test these hypotheses in interviews, prototypes, whatever we need to do, very quickly. And by prototypes, I mean that could be interviews, that could be click dummies, that could be a very lo-fi functioning software solution, that could be anything that helps us understand quick. Kipto, you worked with Google. You're probably familiar with the design sprint. That's a technique of rapidly identifying or removing assumptions and turning them into knowledge in the product development process. And these sprints originally were 5 days long. We can do them in a day. It's not rocket science, and we can go through this, and that's the point where we can actually know what we need to do, and then find the support.
It sounds good, but just one point of correction. Much as I would have loved to have worked for Google, I actually didn't.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah, I worked at Al Jazeera instead.
At?
Yeah, Al Jazeera, the media company.
Al Jazeera. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Someone had stored that you were at Google, but
yeah, no, but I've got many friends who work there, so
okay,
it's understandable.
So Google Ventures came up with that, or defined that process. They didn't come up with it, but so we can do this, and if you agree that this is a good path here, or we all agree, then I would say that let's open the conversation on what does it mean. Last point in the post-harvest value chain, and so I'll quickly pause and ask if is that okay with everybody, that path.
Fine by me.
Makes sense.
Yeah. Luther, you're also in? Luther?
Sorry, yes, I am.
Wonderful.
Sorry, yes, I'm on the call.
Don't worry. Okay, so well, in order to move forward with our definition part, how about each of us, or I'd actually prefer to hear it from the three of you. What do you think of when you think of last step in the post-harvest value chain? Kiptu, you do want to open?
Sure. Actually, I guess I do think of the end consumer.
Mm-hmm.
But initially, I thought a lot about the refinement stage. But I want to take a step back real quick and wonder whether we feel we have enough information at this point to really come up with one. Maybe this is a process of actually really identifying it, or the process of acquiring that information. Yeah, just thought I'd put that out there. I typically think about seeing the food in the supermarket, or by the vendors on the roadsides, and lately I've been thinking quite a bit about the great gap that exists between the expectation of farmers, or the experience of farmers, and the end consumer. If you follow a lot of most of the price of these goods, like milk, for example, in my region, 1 liter of milk is sold for about 30 shillings, which is about 30 US cents. But the same liter of milk will be sold at a supermarket for about $1.50. And that's a massive gap. And I feel like that is really a problem that faces a lot of, a problem that touches on a lot of farmers. And it speaks to how long the value chain is. But I still do think about the consumer, because they are sort of like the final decision makers, that if they act in some way, the ripple effects will eventually get to the grower or the farmer, the producer. But I do find refinement also very interesting, because in many ways it captures a lot of the things we've said in the last couple of months, in terms of the value that it creates. I think about the millions of unemployed youth on this continent, and the missed opportunities to really put them to work if we did real value creation, and in finding some way a way to shorten the supply chain. So it is interesting for me as well. But for now, let me just say that I think about the supermarket stall, aka the consumer.
Okay. Wonderful. Thank you. Tawanda or Luther, do you want to?
Okay. For me, the last step in the post-harvest value chain, I think I'd have to agree with Kiptu, but I would put it in a way as in it's the point where the end consumer has access to food. So whether it's through the supermarket or through, in some cases, it could be, what do we call it here, farm gate marketing. For some consumers, they're able to actually go to the farm and buy direct from the farmer. Or as Kip to put it, in suburbs, neighborhoods, it could be just the small-scale vendor selling on the corner their produce. But yeah, for me, it's the point where the end consumer has access to the food. And I think this is probably where changes need to be made, because just like Kiptu said, that the behavior of the end consumer has greater influence on actually even on production methods, techniques, and the likes. I could give an example of in some countries where here in Africa, there are some countries that allow production of GMOs, and then there are some countries that don't. And part of that issue is also to do with the sentiment involved with the end consumers. Especially, I'll give a crop such as maize. Maize is probably the staple food of Southern Africa. You know, go anywhere in Southern Africa, people everything they have with their main meal is normally white maize or corn or whatever you want to call it. And in most countries, there is a very strong sentiment against genetically modified organisms or GMO. Be it perhaps maybe not for South Africa. I suppose they're used to that. But in most other countries, you'll find there's a very, very strong sentiment against that. But as you will find that at times, because out of desperation that there's not enough maize, in the end, governments end up even allowing people to import genetically modified food. And of course, depending on who you talk to, we know that there are health effects associated with such consumption. So sometimes you may find that when people get to actually know that we're consuming genetically modified food, the consumers might actually reject and say this is not what we are prepared to eat. We are prepared to offer higher value or to pay more to our own local farmers to produce organic food rather than genetically modified, food. But the point is, yes, if we can influence the end consumer, I believe that is where there can be a change in everything. Thank you.
Okay. So generally, I agree with everyone has said, and everyone is kind of speaking to our motivation when we started at Price Valley. So at the end of the day, the power lies with the consumer, then the producer. So from my understanding of, from what I've learned so far now, there are all sorts of, within that value chain, there's all sorts of things that go on that necessarily don't need to. And if I could just, branch out, a lot of the problems we have in Africa, even apart from food and all that, is poor governance. And I know, there's nothing we can do about that, but I just need to point that out because that value chain, like Kipto and Tawanda were talking about, at the end of the day, what we want to do as a private company is to, as much as possible, reorganize it within our own micro company, so that over time people can see what we do or how we do it and probably multiply that around. Because if we can directly get food supplies from farmers directly to the hands of the consumer without, too much, in between, too much, in between, what do you call them, like resellers and all that, we can guarantee some things. We can guarantee lower prices. We can guarantee freshness of the food. We can guarantee a lot of things. We can know where this food is coming from. We can trace it and let the consumer be confident of what they are consuming. So at the end, I think, a cooperative, like at the end of the day, what we want to do is actually, apart from that relationship, directly sourcing these things, we want to build a relationship between the producers and the consumers, such that over time, when the company grows or when we have more capability, we can, people can know where their food is. There can be more, the consumer can tell us this is, from whatever data we get from them or even interviewing them, we can know what exactly their pain points are when it comes to some food items, what they want that they can't get, things like that. Then, that will also influence what the farmer grows, what, whatever, the learnings we get that can help the farmer or the producers. And so, if I can speak to another thing, though, another thing will be that at the end of the day, when the consumer gets the food item, there's also, in Nigeria where I am, there's the probability that you have electricity 24/7 is almost for the rich only, that kind of thing. So one thought that has come to my mind is how can consumers even preserve their food longer? Because many times, if they don't, especially the ones without electricity and all, they eat day to day because they can't keep stuff. They can't buy in bulk when they can because they can't preserve it. So they have to buy every day. So that affects it affects how much they spend on food at the end of the day. It affects availability of food. They have to go outside of their houses to go and get the food. There are all sorts of. So that thought came to me lately that I'm just thinking I should share here. If there's preservation methods for the food for the food that they buy that makes it last longer, that's also a value that consumers can latch on, and even the value chain can latch on, because many of the times we have farmers who grow stuff. Some argue that they don't grow enough, but even the ones that they grow, even over a third of it is destroyed before it gets to. It's just a lot of issues, and I know we've talked about this before. So, finding a pain point that we can use tech or a simple solution to solve would give me joy if we, so that's what I think at the end of the day, the last mile, how do you describe it now? The consumer, the power lies with the consumer, and whatever we can do to the consumer to affect the producer will go a long way. I hope I made sense.
Yes, you did. Thank you. So what I'm hearing is that we should, I'm hearing multiple things, but with different emphasis. So the strongest is how do we enable the consumer to be more empowered in their choices, and the second trace I hear is that is already pointing towards a solution, which is let's connect the consumer and the producer directly. And these are two different questions. So we can, we're free. We can just decide what we mean, and then we go with it, right? So we can ask the question: do we want to engage with consumers to help them become stronger in their voicing of what they need? Do we want to create a connection between the consumer and the producer to shorten the value chain and enable that process. That are two entirely different questions. I don't know if I'm missing more from what you guys said, but these are two things that I heard primarily.
Yeah, you're right. If I can say something, so there, in Africa, there are quite a number of startups that are connecting consumer to producers, but at the end of the day, the startups are in between. Like, for instance, at this stage in my company, we are still in between the producer and the consumer. So we liaise with the producer and serve the consumer. But but that's because we are kind of limited in many ways. If you are looking at creating a marketplace where the user directly, interfaces with the farmer, there are all sorts of things that restrict you. Number one is infrastructure, because the farmer is usually in the rural area. The consumer that you might want to, sell to is on the urban area. Transportation, all sorts of hindrances. So that's why most times there's always the go-between. So if there's a way where that go-between can be removed, and it actually places, that makes the consumer and the producer directly interface, that would be a start for me. Like, that would be a very meaningful start. Even with all the problems that I just mentioned now, if there's a way that can be done, then I think that would be a super solution amongst other things that people can come up with here.
Okay.
What you're saying, Luther, is very interesting, and with respect to like all the constraints that exist, especially among like solution providers like yourselves, just got me thinking about whether it would be worth analyzing the sort of journey, the typical journey of various common products. Because I have a feeling, they're a bit different when it comes to like fresh produce versus grain. And I know we've touched on this before. There was an argument I remember from David Opio about how, with grains, you needed to worry about like, drying them and storing them, not so much getting to the market in the fastest way possible. And it was a valid point. And I feel like we might reach very different conclusions if we're thinking about, let's say, dairy versus maize, and the problems might be a bit different. But I do think, actually no. When you mentioned about removing the possibility of removing the go-between, I think it could work very well with some products, but not with others. For example, with milk, for example, there are processing plants that sit in between, and then there are collectors that take the milk to these processing plants, and then there are distributors that take the milk from the factories to the supermarkets and whatnot. So that profile is different for, let's say, spinach, or for beef.
Yeah, definitely.
And I'm just thinking maybe if it's worth for us to spend some time analyzing some common profiles of the journey of food, and then see where we can hone in.
I think that's all very fruitful. I cannot speak for the situation in Africa, but maybe I'd like to give an example of the current development in agriculture, in food, we see in the US, in Europe, and in many other places. And what we see is that agriculture and communities are starting to get tied stronger together. So that food production and consumers become tightly knit together. Yeah, for example, by having more direct sales, and also along the value chain that is also, so to say, part of the community. It doesn't have to be necessarily the farmer itself, but someone from the community that is, for example, creating cheese, yeah, or whatever. Yeah, and it's really about the community. So without a middleman, yeah, and why is that? Because this is a way to make farming highly profitable, yeah, and because it's tightly knit together. So what the demand is and what the supply is, there is way less information asymmetries that the farmer has no clue about what the people want. Yeah, because they talk to each other, or at least they know what the people bought, and they're using really, let's say, low tech technology. It's available. Yeah, for example, like communication tools to organize the sale. Yeah, scheduling of where to get the food. Yeah, and so that the farmer doesn't have to have too much hassle bringing the food to the people and stuff like that. And I think not everything is applicable to Africa. Yeah, but I think this is something is maybe we should have a look where this occurs, also maybe because of COVID, because the communities have to take care of the community, and the farmers are somehow a part of the community, and how something like that is developing and creating value for the community. And the question is, because we want to scale it, yeah, is this community action in some way scalable if they have access to proven processes and technologies, yeah, for example, like price pally, yeah, because this is applicable everywhere, right? Because right now they don't have access to it, yeah. And I think this is when it comes to my mind how to really impact it, see what works in communities that are similar, yeah, and what we can learn from it, yeah, to really use that to impact other communities of producing food, consuming, and having a tightly knit connection.
Okay.
Tawanda wanted to say something, but I just want to let you know that Anesu is joining any moment. They had some blackout or something, so she's coming.
Oh, awesome. Please tell her where's our song. We are still waiting for our motherland song. Just to touch on what Kiptu said, and maybe complement what Sebastian has been saying. I think it would be good for us maybe to just Google up things like what is it again? Just Google up and say local food systems and sustainable communities, and maybe just read around what's happening in other parts of the world. There's a lot of stuff happening, but I think, and this probably concerns a lot of what Kiptu was saying, the easiest way for us is we need to pick one particular field. I would propose that we start with the lowest hanging fruit, which is the horticultural sector. This is mostly your common vegetables and your fruits. Especially if we want to try and influence at a localized level, I think this is the best place we need to start from. And it's the easiest also to trace the value chain. Because one, you can have domestic producers, and of course you can have farmers coming from other parts of the country to supply vegetable produce. I think that's just the main point I wanted to put out.
If I may say something to that, good point. But vegetables are kind of very risky. I don't know what model. If it's about selling or whatever, I mean, it's hard to preserve. So we have to put that in consideration. Speaking to your point, Tawanda, while you were speaking, you mentioned earlier that Southern Africa basically use a lot of corn and all that. So I'm also thinking, picking from the lowest hanging fruit, if we can actually face a particular crop that gives probably the most value in communities or to people, and be able to make that crop available for even the lowest of the communities, like people who can afford food. If we can make that particular food item very, very affordable, or I don't know, I'm just thinking something that alleviates a problem right away, because my own deepest senses goes out to people who go hungry, especially in Africa, especially in my community, like who go hungry every day. There's no need where anybody should be hungry. Personally, I try to do the best I can, but if it's on a grand scale where a particular food item, let's take that corn for instance, if corn is available throughout the year, if you can make it available throughout the year and at a very subsidized price, and everybody knows that, okay, this is corn from, say, Motherland corn or something, and they can get it, and there's a way we can sustainably produce it and distribute it and all that. So that's just a thought. That will make a lot of difference, especially right away.
If I can just add,
we
would have to study. Okay.
Tawanda, once you're done adding, I'd like to welcome, or you can welcome Anesu and bring her up to speed because you just joined.
Okay. All right. I'll just add quickly and then we'll do the welcome. Right. If I can just add, you see, the thing with food systems, especially if it's something that has to do with a staple crop, you are likely to start having to study regulations and whether you would be actually stepping on the toes of the politicians, because this is something that touches everybody, and especially something as sensitive or as strategic as a staple crop. A lot of heads will be raised. And I think then it then defeats the purpose of us going for, the lowest hanging fruit. It could actually wind up taking us years to actually begin to get things into motion. And because of, I've been trying to do also things like even grain imports here in Zimbabwe. So I've begun to understand actually the whole mechanisms of how everything works. And I'll tell you that also you might have to consider, again, capital constraints. How do we do this or leverage this in such a way that we create the most impact without having to use a lot of capital? And if you are thinking really about grain, we might end up having to also look at that, especially if we're going to do something that will touch the last mile. On that note, Anesu, welcome. We are crying. Where is our song? Where is our motherland song? We are not going to let you today without an update on our song. We need to know. But welcome, and we are having a good discussion. We are touching on the issue of, first we touched off on our motivation. Why are we doing this? And from there, I think you shared your motivation the last time we had a talk with Thomas. Now from there, we've begun to touch on what is our understanding of the last mile in the post-harvest value chain. And apart from that, we've begun to touch a bit on key issues, looking at it from the consumer side, from the farmer side, and touching on where is it exactly we can create impact, and also how best can we tackle that question. But yeah, make sure our song is ready.
Do you hear us, Anesu? We can see you here in the conversation, but we don't hear you at the moment.
Then I'd like to add something to the discussion until Anesu can say something.
Yeah.
I think we should consider all the activities of entrepreneurs in Africa, because they are on the ground, they're doing something, they're moving the needle. Yeah, and the question is, should we start with something from scratch? I doubt that, because we don't have the capacities and time, and because of all what we do. But the question is are there initiatives and startups out there where we not only can learn from, but where we can achieve what we're talking about by supporting those? Yeah, and because in the end we want to have impact. Yeah, and therefore we need entrepreneurs that drive things against all impediments. Yeah, and they have a dedicated knowledge in their field. Yeah, and we are not starting from scratch with something. I would rather feel positive if we have identified initiatives or working together with people that are in the driver's seat, and we become more like the empowering community to those that are already done something phenomenal. And
couple of companies that are, really doing well, thriving well in agri, but they are mostly B2B. Like, they're not affecting the consumer. Like most startups in Africa going into agriculture, at the end of the day, branch out to B2B because it's safer, there's more money. Like, I know, Thrive Agric, Farm Crowdy, that were, basically directly affecting agriculture even to the consumer. Like, you can invest and you can get returns, then you can buy foodstuff and stuff. But right now, most of them are just pushing to B2B. So would those kind of companies be? I mean, what would the direction be if you are looking at that, supporting companies like you just mentioned? Would it be basically those affecting the individual families, or consumers basically, or a mix of B2B, or would you have like a guideline? I mean, would you have like a type of startup you are looking at?
well, I think this needs to be defined then, yeah, depending on the where we expect to really see an opportunity to make a difference. Yeah, and probably we are not the only 6 persons in Africa that think about that challenge, and probably there are a couple of that are doing good. And the question is how to join the forces to impact these initiatives or startups, or however we might call them, or what they are. Maybe it's a community initiative that is working fabulously in one community, but the other communities that are trying to achieve the same, from our understanding, is not knowing about the other. Yeah, and they are not sharing the learnings. And and I think it's more about our understanding of where do we see the lever, and how we are able to narrow it down. And then the question is, okay, how to do the research and the validation that there is a real potential.
I think the approach that you're proposing, Sebastian, makes sense. And obviously, it's great that we already have, one such startup in the form of Price Pally, and the many others that we've listed already. So I think it would be a good way to continue the work that we've started. But I'm also just thinking about what you said earlier about how the situation in Western regions of the world, like the US and the EU, where we already see tighter communities or stronger connections between producers and consumers. When you spoke, I thought that is also potentially a good approach to find a way to develop or actually seek out if there exist such networks here already, and if not, I mean, be really on the start pursuing them, because I think it's one way of solving many of the problems that we have been talking about. So yeah, I don't know if that made sense, but
it does. I was just answering Anesu, who's hearing us, but who cannot connect her voice channel. She's on a phone, so maybe somebody has a idea of how to solve her problem. Let's share.
It could be mic input. Sometimes, at least on a MacBook, for example, sometimes the output device of the system is different from that of Zoom. So I'd go to the Zoom audio.
She's on a phone. Anissa, maybe okay. If you're using a headset, maybe you disconnect the headset and see whether that's the problem, and use the phone directly.
All right, can anyone hear me?
Yes. Welcome.
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes. We hear you.
Our song.
Okay, let me just you can hear me now, but I cannot hear you. I don't know how to fix this. Okay, can you hear me now?
We hear you. Yes.
There we go. So it was the headphones.
Okay. Very good. So, do you want to sing the song immediately, or do you want to do it later?
It's still in the pipeline.
This is about the song. I missed something, I guess.
Pardon?
Apparently, Anesu offered to write a motherland song.
Like an anthem. The motherland anthem?
Yes.
Nice.
So I'll try and knot everything together that I've heard so far, which I like very much, and then I think I would love to give Anesu a moment to also share her motivation with us, and her thoughts on where we stand regarding our question. So.
Sorry, it's just people were talking.
Sorry?
There are other people who were talking.
Oh, don't worry. So we have the producer, we have the consumer. My understanding is that we want to connect them directly in the best scenario. We connect them directly with each other. We are aware that there are several challenges regarding infrastructure, like cooling, etc., on both sides, and we are also aware that this is very dependent on or the minutia of each of this connection are very dependent per crop. So it's very, there might be differences between maize and tomatoes, and one direction we can now go into is to ask, to analyze this for each of the crops. But I have the assumption, at least, that there are many startups across Africa trying to close that gap, building on what we've discussed in the past months, building on what we just discussed here, and so what they have looked at this problem, I'm pretty sure. So we shouldn't do that work again. Maybe our work is more in connecting them laterally, in order to help them strengthen each other and learn from each other at a faster rate. And if that is a hypothesis we all accept and subscribe to, then the next question becomes, how do we collect as many of these as possible and have structured conversations with them, interviews or questionnaires or group conversations like this, all the way up to that conference that we were talking about, whatever it might be. But if we agree that this is these are the people we want to speak to, because now we say, okay, this is our definition of the last point in the post-harvest value chain, then how do we get them? How do we get to them? That would be almost leading to the next step. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense. But I just can I add something quickly?
Yes, of course.
Yeah. So thinking about the problem, of connecting farmers and all that, one of the ideas I've been toying around with is basically moving. One of the major constraints is that most of the farmlands are in the rural areas, the undeveloped areas and all that. And most of the people living in the cities are just, most of the cities are just blocks, not much agriculture is happening in the city itself. And if we can have that changed in a way, if let's say, there's something called peri-urban farming. During my research, I, learned about that. If there's a way where food is grown closer to the cities, especially in Africa, closer to the cities, it changes a whole lot of things. It changes the fact that you can serve people fresh food almost immediately. It shortens the chain. It takes out the problem of storage, and not entirely, but to a large extent, it reduces the problem of storage. It guarantees better output, in the sense that if I know the number of people in the city, I can better than the farmer in the rural area. I can better assume what to plant, how to plant, how many things I need to plant and all that. I think it's just the summary of it is bringing production closer to the consumer. The closer it is, the more efficient it will become. Because typically, for example, rice in Nigeria today is mostly grown in the middle belt. That's a lot. It could take you, if you're driving from Lagos, which is like the urban city, to those areas where those rice are grown, it will take you hours. If you are driving a normal car, it will probably take you a day or two. So, the idea I've been working around with is, I'm thinking about, not actually working on it, I'm just suggesting it. It's, if there's a way where peri-urban farming can be encouraged, it will improve a lot of things in Africa, basically. In my country, it will definitely reduce a lot of these problems that we have. So I don't know if that makes any sense.
Makes a ton of sense to me. It's actually a topic I've been looking at as well. And I see the trend in Nairobi. A lot of people, who own not massive tracts of land, but like really small, but very fertile and productive pieces of land. And a person makes a dash over the weekend and just gets produce for themselves and their neighbors and friends. And it's a very interesting model because, as you said, it gets fresh food and gets away with the issue of storage and longer supply chains. So I'm excited about this possibility as well. But also as a product, I think potentially of Motherland is a suite of tools that targeted at the startups like Price Ballet and many others who already are solving these problems in a very focused and micro way, if you will.
So I think as well, it's a fantastic solution. Yeah, and we're going to see this type of solutions definitely in the future, because this is really it's really at hand, and probably, but this is probably one solution that is driving impact. Yeah. So, for example, I'm currently working together with an accelerator program in Sri Lanka. Yeah, and what we see here, they are solving the problem of logistics, yeah, by creating logistics chains on a peer-to-peer level, and making sure of that that the supply is brought to the city in a more efficient way, yeah, to help the farmers where they currently live to have a better outcome, yeah, and doing it really as a platform and enabling that. So what I want to say with that, yes, this type of agriculture will come and it will be one part of the solution. Probably there are several others, yeah, that will have an impact to this farm to fork, yeah. And I think maybe it's good to come up with a structured approach, coming up with, I don't know, 5 solutions where we see the potential that they really can make a difference. Yeah, and this type of closer to city farming is probably one, but there's also the need for higher investments, and it will take some time, whatever. But if it's rolled out, it will really move the needle. Yeah, and I think we are not there yet to say, we can focus on one, yeah, and because therefore we would need to understand where are those drivers, and the one you have just mentioned is definitely one, but what are the others?
Okay, I guess, like Thomas said, like we also discussed last week, me, Thomas, and Tawanda, is we need to, for now we know one thing that is troubling farmers, and that is getting their produce straight to the customers. And that can be solved here in Zimbabwe. There are now third-party retailers who are going to the farms with their cars, and then they're buying in bulk and coming and selling in town, or just delivering straight to the houses. That's one solution. We probably need to talk to the farmers, like Thomas was saying, have a questionnaire, survey them, talk to them, understand all the issues they are facing, so that we know the right solutions to provide. We might actually end up having 7 solutions. I think that's my suggestion, to also cut time on the solutions we need.
I have a question, stepping one step back, and are there groups of people, like for example startups, that have asked these questions already, that we can easily address? Because then we don't have to repeat that process of asking the questions. Are there startups that want to want to bridge that gap between the producer and the consumer? Are there startups that wants to bring agriculture closer to the consumer? Probably yes. Probably there are, and definitely they have had these conversations with both ends of the people. So our if we say that we want to bring the customer and the consumer and the producer together closer, and if we say that we are operating on a meta level where we can have a pan-African impact with a strong lever, then maybe it makes sense looking at who has had these conversations and how can we have conversations with these people to learn on a fast lane, and then learn how we can how we can strengthen them in what they do already.
Here in Zimbabwe, I know of one very small digital organization, Imbari. They started on Facebook. So what they do, you order the day before you need the produce, you pay it, they deliver it to you tomorrow, the things you'd have ordered. And then closer to home, here in Tari, I know of individuals, some live a few houses down from here. Like I said, they go to the market or to the farms, and then they just buy in bulk, add markup, come back, and then sell to the people who would be left here, people who could not make it to the farms. So I guess we can try to talk to them, mostly individuals. In terms of organization, I only know one, that is Imbari. I don't know other guys.
Well, in terms of us, I know Price Valley. The others I also know as well, but like the question I wanted to ask is, are we looking at B2C or B2B? Because most of the ones I know are far ahead and they're B2B, doing a lot of big deals with companies and all that.
So I have a very strong and personal opinion on that. I would look at B2C.
Okay.
We don't want to support organizations like Nestle or whatever in becoming even better at exploiting. So we should ensure that the actual consumers of the products live in Africa.
Okay.
Would restaurants and maybe like boutique hotels count as a B2C or cafes?
No, those are B2Bs, right?
So I think we should make one distinction here. Yeah, I think it's more important that the value generation is taking place in Africa and not somewhere outside of Africa. And I think we all have a tendency towards B2C. Yeah, but I think we should keep the doors a little open towards B2C that is adding value, create jobs in Africa. Yeah, and I think that might be a
B2B?
coffee. Sorry, B2B.
Yeah.
And so I think that might be something we shouldn't completely let out of our...
We can define it in a way that the end product is consumed and used in Africa, which means that refinement takes place in Africa, consumption takes place in Africa, and if so, it could be direct to the end consumer or direct to a business that refines within Africa, and then like a cafe, for example, right, or like a restaurant. That I think would be okay, but the use of the product must take place in Africa, and it cannot be exported or anything, because then we're just exploiting again. And if we're after something like self-sufficiency and self-reliancy, then we should rule that out categorically right from the beginning. That's my opinion. I don't know.
I'm in agreement. I'm also thinking about the many schools, especially boarding schools, and at least in a place like Kenya, they consume a lot of this produce as well, and of course, these are children of the place. Yeah. So yeah, it makes sense. I agree with that.
Okay, I wanted to ask. I was thinking this week that yes, we can have a B2C or a B2B, and since our main goal, from what I'm saying, is we want Africa to be connected, to become like a small village here in agriculture, right? When I went to Mozambique before lockdown, most of the farmers there are very, very, very small. We cannot even put them in the SME sector. They're individuals. So can we also, whilst we're making solution, can we also include those backyard farmers, since we want to, since we want our solution to be able to touch everyone. Most of the farmers are backyard farmers and they have a lot of produce they don't know what to do with. So with that being said, looking at Imbari, I think it was Elizabeth who once said this, I don't remember, but we can create something. It doesn't need to be physical, but it can be digital, where we will become the agent between customers and farmers. That way we'll be able to control on both sides where we get the produce from and where the produce goes to.
My question for this conversation today, that I want to come out with an answer if possible, is who do we ask which question? Right?
Okay.
So what is that? That means, what is our next step? Who do we want to address in asking a question? What is our question to some group of people? These group of people could be farmers. This group of people could be consumers or startups in between, or schools, or I don't know who. But we have to learn something, so we have to be able to ask a question. And my question to you as a group is, who do we want to ask a question to, and what is that question?
If I can say something to the farmers, we want to ask them how profitable their, endeavors are year in, year out, how much they make, if it's enough to even feed them and all that, so that the problem they face when it comes to them farming and not making the most of it. That will be one. And how could you help them make more money? Because I think most of the farmers in Africa, their main problem is the fact that they don't make as much as effort they put into it. So that would be a good question to ask them. How can you help them? What are their capabilities? If you say you give them market, if you give them market today, for instance, someone's planting rice or beans or something, you want to know what capacity they have, like how much can they supply, if you can get them that access to market. So practical questions around their operations and their revenue. That will be my take.
Okay, wonderful. Any other suggestions?
Sorry, go ahead, Dennis.
No, okay. I think on the customer side as well, for me, on the customer side, we need to ask them, number one, are they getting access to all the produce they need? And if everything was well, and then it could be delivered to them, are they willing to pay a certain price? So that, like what Price was saying, that we need to bring money back into the farmer's pocket. We need to know if the customers are willing to pay that money as well.
If I can add more to that, the name is Luther, not Price, though. So I think another question you have to ask consumer will be, how much they spend on food. Because I don't know about other African countries, because in Nigeria, one of our biggest problems is the fact that food is expensive, like it's literally stupidly expensive. If I'm in the village or the rural area, I can get food for next to nothing. But before it gets to me in the city, the prices go crazy, and so many other reasons around it. So that's the most important question to the average Nigerian family is how much they spend on food monthly. Then before you even talk about nutritional value or anything, the fact that they need to be able to get food at an affordable price would be an ideal question. Like, how much would you pay for this particular item? That would be another good question to ask. What is their budget like in an ideal situation? How much money can they spend on, food items basically?
Yeah, I have one question for each of these three groups. For farmers, and tying it to what I had in mind earlier, I would ask them. The primary question I have for farmers is like, when you produce something or before you even produce it, do you know who is going to consume it? Like, in other words, do you have a ready market for it? And it's a concern for me because we see a lot of farmers produce things, and then at the end of the day they're complaining that my produce is going bad, or the produce board is refusing to buy my maize, and so I got a loss. For solution providers like Luther at Price Parade, I would want to know about their data needs. How do they actually know who needs what? And where do they get it from? Like, how do you actually do the connecting? What data needs exist in solving this problem? I feel my hypothesis is that there's a lot of big opportunities to use data in a good way to really optimize and tighten the connection between the farmer and the consumer. For the consumer, I would want to know what they care about as an open-ended question. So I would not ask them, what is your pain point about pricing? I would ask them, what do you really care about when you're making your decision on what to buy? Do you care about how much it costs, or whether it's a GMO, or whether it's like organically grown? Or do you more or less just care about its freshness? Or would you rather know the farmer who produced it? Would you want it to be customized in a certain way? So it's more about open, leaving it open for them, so that I think we have they sort of guide the discussion. So in summary, for the farmer,
Yeah, that's true.
Do you have a ready market? Do you know who's going to buy this? For solution providers, what data needs exist? And for consumers, like, what do you actually care about when it comes to buying food?
Sorry to cut in, guys. Apparently the Wi-Fi guys are here. Yesterday we had a lot of wind, and the pole actually bent a little, so it damaged a lot of Wi-Fi routers. So they're here to fix it. So we need to turn off all our Wi-Fi routers in the line. So I have to leave, but
Okay.
I will read through everything on the Notion, and will jot down everything that I'm also thinking.
Wonderful. Thank
All
you.
right.
Good luck.
All right. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Thank you, Anisu.
All right.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
So one thing I'd like to add to the discussion is the question of, we all agree there's kind of a big market inefficiency in terms of what the farmers produce for a certain amount of work and input that costs them money, and the amount that is arriving at the market or at the people for a certain amount of money. And I would be interested to have kind of a structured analysis on where are the biggest losses or where could be the biggest gains in terms of efficiency or drivers to overcome, let's say, this type of market failures we also see, because that was what Price was telling us.
Okay, I'll take it like that.
Yeah, is okay. The food is cheap on the countryside where it is produced, and it's get expensive like crazy when you bring it to the city. And probably there's kind of a market failure here or efficiency problem that you try to solve with Price Pally. And I think that would also be interesting. Probably it's different from country to country. Yeah. And but what I have seen, because I looked at small farms in Europe and the US lately, and what that want to become profitable without subsidies, yeah, which is still kind of a challenge. And they have two main drivers. The first driver is build what the people really what the people demand. Yeah, grow what the people demand, having there a good match. This is one driver, so that you don't have to throw away anything of your produce. Then organize your production in a crazy efficient way. Yeah, innovate on how to do things over and over again to become more efficient without using expensive machinery or investing into the classical agriculture machineries that will drive you into bankruptcy because they cost you so much, and all the interest rates, etc., etc., etc. And the last thing they care about is how to market or bring their produce to the people. And for example, one thing one farmer told me in rural part of Sweden, yeah, where there are no large cities, yeah, and he said he just bringing his produce to the people that are organized via a Facebook group to a meeting point once a week, and then the people come and pick up the stuff, yeah, and it only takes him 1 hour to bring his produce to the people, and not standing 5 hours on the farmer's market or having to open up a farmer's store at his property, yeah, and the people come by the whole week and want to buy stuff, and they were looking just for efficiency gains to become more profitable, yeah. And I think this is something, yeah, probably has a lot of potential when we look at what's going on currently in Africa, yeah. And the question is where we can tap into, yeah, for example, like something like Price Pally is doing, yeah, that really moves the needle to bring costs down, yeah, and drive the return on their investment and their produce of the farmers, etc. So identifying those sweet spots that really impact the system.
I'm having a hard time getting down to what does that mean now in practice. So, I mean, we're discussing tackling 3 large segments of people, and the question is, how do we want to go about that? Do we focus on one of these 3? Do we find a way of addressing all 3? How do we want to go about this? I'm a little stuck on that. What's your ideas?
In my view, the best solution or approach will be the one that involves all 3, because it's, at the end of the day, it's a connected system, right? I think all that we'll be saying is potentially is going to potentially touch on all 3 aspects. So, for example, one thing we could possibly do is, build, again, hinting at what I said earlier, build, massive database or a data-driven solution that consists of, these are the consumers. This is where they live. This is their consumption pattern. On Tuesdays, they will order, potatoes of this quantity, and they prefer to get, XYZ from, I don't know, grown in a certain way. And the producers are here. This is their production cycle. And if we have this data, we can really find better matches and drive out the inefficiencies in the market, like Sebastian was saying. So such a solution, for example, would touch everybody, because we need to involve the farmers. In that case, we are supporting the solution providers, or we are one large solution provider. And of course, we're giving a good service to consumers.
Okay, but building on that, we should first find out, are there solution providers doing that already? Because we shouldn't do it again if there's somebody doing it already.
Yeah.
And what we, if we find that people are doing it already, then we should find ways of making them stronger.
Right. Yeah. So my hunch is that there's no solution provider who can do that, because they are focused on operations. And Motherland would have the advantage in that we're not necessarily looking to actually execute, go find the farmers and also the consumers, but rather we're looking to be a platform of platforms, right? So it's something, the way I imagine it is like, Price Pilot would hook into this, some other company doing something similar in a different region of the continent would hook into this platform, and they all benefit from the scale at which we're operating in, but which they cannot because of the constraints of operations. Like, operations is time and capital intensive.
Luther, do you see it that way?
Yeah. My only thought about it that could be an hindrance is difference in, countries. Like, for this platform or platforms I'm thinking that, is it like going to cover Nigeria, or it's going to cover Africa, or some parts of it? Because I'll prefer if that solution is localized. That's where you can make the most of it. We're already gathering data at Price Valley. We gather, we know who our consumers are. We know what they buy. We know what cycle for the ones that have been regular, at least that have bought over 3 times from us. We can tell you, we can predict when next they're buying. We can predict their shopping cart, and we predict, we also know around their budget. So it makes a lot of sense, but my worry is, how does that work? I mean, would it be a localized solution? Because the reason why Price Valley is not in any other states, even within Nigeria, we are only operating in one state right now, is that we look at the food system in each state, and we try to latch on that food system and improve it in many ways that we can. Because we realize we can't do the whole of Nigeria at once because of several inefficiencies, which it take a long time to even talk about. So that would be the only constraint, because you can't do that. You can't do it in the case where everything works, but in our case, you can't do it because of those constraints. It has to be probably localized per city, most likely, so that you have, the demand on one side and the supply on one side, or else, you will still be facing the problem I was talking about when it comes to marketplace. The service at the back end. Even when somebody makes an order online or does anything online, there's the back end of it. The work behind that is the problem. It's where the constraint will be. So my advice is it has to be localized.
Yeah, absolutely. Just to caveat that, this idea that just put out is just one of many possible ideas, right? It's Sebastian mentioned earlier about finding like a structured solution finding way, and I was just choosing this specific one as a potential solution that would need to touch on all the three parts. That being said, I do agree with you. It would need to be, I think it would have to be both standardized and localized. I think about something like Google Maps, right? It's a platform for showing data on in a map view, and to use it as a developer. Let me use it let me explain it in developer terms. You can hook into Google Maps in the form of an API. There's a very defined way in which you need to query it and obtain data from it, or push data to it, and so a platform in that sense allows both a very well-defined way of exchanging information, but also localizing it to your specific needs. So to bring it back to this example, this potential solution, it would be like a massive data set of data sets, I guess, and each provider in each country or even each city would come in and plug into it and push data to it and also benefit from it. So it's possible, I think, to both localize it and universalize it, if you will.
Yeah, and one thing though, can you expand on the idea of what it's the use of it at the end of the day? Like, would it be something the service provider logs onto, or the end consumer can log onto, or the farmer logs onto? If you just clarify that, maybe I'll get some ideas.
Sure. Let me use the example of mobility, right? I'm in mobility right now. One of the biggest problems we have is building critical mass in terms of both in a peer-to-peer platform like ours. We have both drivers or service providers and passengers, people who need like rides, right? If I wish there existed a way to say, okay, there's a data set that you can plug into that contains like the numbers of passengers or their preferred travel patterns, right? And this is the data set for Kenya, and this is a data set for Nigeria. If there existed like such a thing, it would become like a mobility product because you already have the data set. Now we would just focus on the operations. Not so much on marketing to build the community itself, because a lot of what we spend our energies in is where the people want to travel. Like, we expend capital, finding these people and also building the technology platform to enable this to power the operations. But if somebody had built already like this data set, it would become very easy. And so what I'm imagining is, what you do at Price Valley, at the end of the day, is probably similar to what, let's say, East Africa Fruits does in Tanzania or Twiga in Kenya. I imagine that there's a common set of needs in the form of data. Who are the producers and who are the consumers and where are they? And if you could plug into that data and take from it and also push it as you continually use it, it becomes better, right? Like your predictive algorithm that predicts somebody's cut would become very efficient if you had a richer data set than just the data of Lagos, for example. It would become very easy to reproduce your solution in another city or in another country.
Yeah, okay. Makes sense.
Tawanda, I'd be curious about your thoughts on this as well.
Yeah, I think what Kiptu is saying actually makes sense. Yeah, my thoughts were on, I thought a bit about it on the farmer side. And I think it's important also to ask the question, what influences their production decisions? I'll give you an example. We have in our group a very active farmer. I think we mentioned it last time, Thomas, in the form of Anesu. And she's shared her journey, even one of her radio chats. So I've known Anesu for quite some time. And what I can say about Anesu is that she grows a select few crops. obviously, we know her as a mushroom lady. But apart from mushrooms, there are just a few other crops that she will grow, like baby marrow is one of them. Another one being, what's that other crop? I think it's lettuce. And she'll avoid, and cucumbers. She'll avoid other crops like carrots and so forth. And, when I've asked her, why aren't you growing this particular crop? Even if it has high value in the market, she'll say, it's not my skill set. Or that's one. Or I don't have the adequate knowledge. That's two. Or the third issue is that in terms of the equipment required to grow that particular crop, I'm not yet at that stage. And then the fourth one is she will just simply say, maybe I don't like it, or I don't like growing that particular crop. I have no interest there. So I think it's also an open-ended question to ask the farmers. What's prompting the decision to grow the particular crop that they're growing? One thing you will find, especially in marketplaces at times, is that there are certain times of the year where it's not a good idea to supply a certain crop to the market because it floods, and then as a result there's a nosedive in the price. In the end, the farmers fail to realize a good price. More so to the extent that the capital they've already used to grow that crop, they might not even recover it. So I think that's one pertinent question to ask the farmers in what influences their decision to grow a particular crop. Another scenario that often occurs is one where you'll find farmers copying the next farmer. Say, for example, we have patches of land next to each other. And I happen to notice that you're growing tomatoes. In some cases, maybe you actually have a contract farming arrangement for those tomatoes. I may not know, but because I'm seeing you grow, maybe a hectare or 2 hectares or 3 hectares of tomatoes, I'm going to just conclude, I think tomatoes this time of year is going to make a lot of money. And then I also just jump in, go and I buy the inputs or the requirements for growing those tomatoes. But when I supply to the market, right, the market is flooded, or even before I supply, maybe because for example, in Zim right now, this is winter time, and I may not have adequate knowledge about tomatoes. What happens is, what do I do when they're attacked by ground frost? How do I counter ground frost? How do I handle that? Do I even know about things like mulching? What is the mulching procedure? And all of those, the tricks that are needed even in growing tomatoes during winter time. I don't know anything about that, but because I saw the next farmer growing tomatoes, I just thought it's a good idea. So these are some of the questions we now need to also try draw the farmers to talk about. You'll find in a lot of cases we do have what I'll just say copycat syndrome. 70% of the time you'll find a lot of people just copy because they think it's got money. And then, just as Kiptu is saying, I think we have to have an immersive platform that involves everyone, from the farmer, the value chain operators, and again, the end consumers. I think it's the best way, because we really can't separate the three. Somehow, somewhere, we have to all understand their preferences, tastes, and desires. Yeah, so I think I'll leave it at that.
I must say I'm actually very happy because I think we with the help of Kiptu, we arrived at a hypothesis actually, and so the next step has changed from what I expected it to be into formulating that hypothesis and then finding out how to best validate that hypothesis or falsify it, because there are some difficulties with it, but it could actually be, and it feels like it, that we are on the verge of our first product now, thanks to Kiptu. So I'm really happy about that. I don't know if you guys see it the same way.
Well, price, Luther, I will have to confirm and tell us if that's something that you would see value in, and maybe your peer
Yeah,
companies.
definitely. But the question, I mean, it's a lot. There's still a lot to see or to to design around what the hypothesis you just brought forward. I think I'll think about it. But I think the core of it now is data, right? The core of what we're talking about is data. And
yes, it's data.
Yes.
From my experience, it's a lot of work, and yeah, but it sounds like something that fits the ideas fits what we've been trying to figure out. And I think before now there was somebody mentioned, I think it was Crypto, that mentioned something around this, but not clearly as this. So I think it will be worth it, but we just have to test it out and prove it out. First, I think the question I would really want to dig down in will be the value this would bring to both the consumer and the producer, and whoever comes in. If we can have what we like, for instance, the producers, what are they going to get? What would this platform be able to give them once they plug in? What's the advantage to the consumer as well once they plug in, and what's the advantage to the to a company like Price Value once they plug in? I think that would further broaden what we need to do. Would further let us know what we need to do.
So I take the role again of offering concrete next steps, and I think what we should do is have a rough sketch, a written form, like half a page or something, that describes what you outlined, Kiptu. I think the best thing would be maybe you want to write the first version of that, and then we bounce it around, and then we get together again maybe next week and discuss that hypothesis. But more than that, focus on the question of how do we validate it, right? And we can take multiple steps in validating it. We can first look at the consumer side and see how we can validate there, and then look at the producer side and see how we can validate it there, and then at the almost already validated side of the price pallies across Africa, that's whether they would also agree. And I think once we've validated all these three sides, we have a really strong proposal. And in the back of my mind, I've been already scanning potential collaborators on this and partners, and I can see several. So I think this is going in a good direction. Beautiful.
Yeah, I'm happy to put together something like a half pager, and then I'll just throw it out into the group, or
great, yeah.
a link to a document.
Yeah, just put it into Notion or into our WhatsApp, and I think you should make sure that it ends up in Notion. But if you just put it into WhatsApp, I'm happy to put it into Notion as well.
Sure. Yeah. Sounds great.
Cool. Wow. Thank you.
Wonderful.
Yeah, awesome.
Eventually.
Yeah.
And next time we want to hear the Motherland song, right?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
So
I wonder what language it will be in.
No excuses about Wi-Fi that needs to be shut down or stuff like that. This only works once.
So it's a wonder if you speak to Anesu, you can tell her if she doesn't come up with the Motherland song, I will sing it. That might be scary enough to bring her.
Okay, I'll tell you. I'll definitely tell you that.
Tawanda, how popular is the name Anesu?
Anesu.
Yeah,
it's quite a popular. It's a fairly popular name here. It's just like my name, Tawanda. It's a very, very popular name here.
I know
Anesu
that
just means God with us, or God is
okay.
with us. That's what Anesu
In
means.
Shona?
Tawanda means we are many.
Nice.
Yes,
nice.
in Shona,
Like
yes.
Right.
What does Kiptu mean, by the way?
It means he who was born when there was a visitor. So my aunt was visiting when I was born, and
Wow.
so our births are you're named usually around the circumstances of your birth. So time of year,
Yes,
events,
yeah.
weather.
That's very true. Yeah.
Yeah. So I like visitors and guests.
Beautiful. I'll take you up on that.
Yeah.
All right. Wonderful. Is there anything else you want to share? Anybody? Otherwise, we could wrap up for today. Anything?
Nothing much, but just I'm here to finish the podcast shared by Sebastian. I think it was very interesting. The Sweden-based farmer, and I think there's a lot to learn from there as well.
Okay.
Yeah, so there's just a big variety of podcasts that is focusing only about profitability and how to make a small farm work. Right, I think there is a lot to learn here.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's very interesting, and I think we have the opportunity to pursue those ideas here as well.
That's so crazy. They build a lot of their gear themselves. By a fraction of the money, and it's really easy to do. It's really like hardware maker space, and they just do their stuff, and it works, and it's cheap, and they are profitable after 1 year after starting a farm. It's
brilliant.
It's brilliant, and it's people think that's not possible.
I'm really keen on really studying them and seeing whether we can learn from them. So thank you.
Cool. So it was a pleasure, like always, sharing time with you, and really looking forward to the next steps. And we are getting there.
Yes.
It's always a journey of ups and downs, but I really feel so blessed that we have now a group of people that stick together and drive it forward. We don't need 30 people. It's enough that we have 5, right? And so that's, or I don't know, but that's so cool.
Yes.
Good.
Thank you so much.
Thomas, by the way, when you're leaving to Costa Rica, and how high is the probability that you're leaving to Costa Rica?
So probability is high. I just got my COVID-19 negative test just before our call.
Wow, awesome!
Which is a requirement when you enter the country. Everything is set. I have like a whole bunch of papers I need. So fingers crossed. I'll be leaving tomorrow. And I'll arrive sometime on Monday. So this also means that in CET time, in the next couple of weeks, I'll be available in the late afternoon, evening.
Okay.
Do you live and work there?
My wife is in Costa Rica, and so we bounce between Costa Rica and Berlin. But we haven't seen each other for 4 months because of COVID, and that's why I'm going there.
Cool. All the best.
So should we try to schedule the next meeting already?
We can, yes.
Because what's in the calendar is in, right? So for me, Thursday looks good. or Friday probably is also possible.
For me, only Saturday works.
Okay, that also works for me.
Yeah,
Same
amazing.
here. Same here.
Yeah, I can do Saturday. Yeah.
Then let's
So
go for Saturday.
my preferred time is anything after 4 or 5 o'clock CET. So, but I'm open anytime after that on Saturday.
Same time
not
should
too
work
late.
then.
Yeah. Works as well.
Yeah, this time was perfect because it's not too late here in East
But
Africa.
it's a little
also.
late. It's a little later then, right, Thomas? It's
Yeah,
then 1 hour later
1
than
hour
today.
later. It's 4 o'clock. So 1 hour later than today.
Let's do it 4 o'clock, so it's not getting too late here, because then I have to take care of the kids. And
okay. Yeah. So I'll see once I settled there whether I can also make it 3 or something. So a little earlier for you guys, but 4 would be amazing.
All right.
Okay. I'll
you send around. Okay.
I'll send it. Yeah. Okay.
Also to great.